We'll jump into today's episode right after this announcement. For over 13 years, something remarkable has been happening. Rural hospitals and other small healthcare organizations that have partnered with Capstone have been achieving results and forming workplace cultures that even we are blown away by. It is truly a game changer when rural hospitals are the provider of choice and employer of choice so they can keep care local and margins strong. Far more healthcare organizations need to experience what's possible. That's why we're stepping forward in a bigger way, expanding our team of experts, expanding our capabilities by adding a strategic planning division to expand our ability to help even more rural hospitals and other healthcare organizations in 2026 and beyond. Capstone will continue to be the partner that small healthcare organizations can count on to meet them where they're at and guide them towards a stronger future. You can learn more at capstoneleadership.net. It's really important to, mention or re-mention that, data is really meant to drive improvement in positive ways, not to overwhelm, not to punish, not to confuse people. So we want to really understand how best to use data in this way to be a positive force for change in our organization, such as improving service excellence.
Welcome to Culture Change RX, the podcast for healthcare professionals that are committed to creating a thriving workplace culture, improving the experiences of employees and patients, and ultimately unlocking their organization's next level of potential. I'm Sue Tetzlaff, your host and co-founder of Capstone Leadership Solutions. Join me and my insightful guests each week as we share actionable insights for navigating the crucial people side of the business of healthcare. Subscribe now for a weekly dose of Culture Change RX. Now let's dive into this week's conversation where culture change takes center stage.
Welcome to another episode of Culture Change RX. It is me, Sue Tetzlaff, the co-founder of Capstone Leadership Solutions and the host of the show, Culture Change RX. And I'm so glad to be with you here again for another weekly episode all about the people side of healthcare. And for today's topic, I was reminded of this topic when we got another one of those phone calls from a healthcare executive reaching out to Capstone to say, hey, we need customer service training for our staff. And so we get those calls from time to time, and it reminded me of a keynote session and even a white paper that we wrote years ago titled The It's of Customer Service. And we had coined these 9 it's. And I know it sounds kind of weird, but anyway, it is what we landed on. But it is really about what do we have to do? What is it that we have to do to be able to create customer service that is at an exceptional level? And it's not just training. And often we get reached out by people who want us to provide customer service training because they've seen the kind of customer service, patient satisfaction results that our partner hospitals are able to get. And so the perception may be that, all of the magic is in just providing service training for your staff and those results are going to follow. But really what we've learned is that training alone won't create a service-driven organization, but we know what will. And while training is important, it's just not sufficient. So organizations that rely only on training often experience things such as short-term improvements that fade over time, inconsistency in that service across departments or shifts, or frustration that, we have tried this before, we've done this training before, and it really didn't get any results. So why are we doing it again? Because the truth that we've learned is that training for it is just one of the many it's required to achieve and sustain service excellence. And more exactly, after decades of working with small and rural healthcare organizations, we've learned something critical. It is that exceptional service is not created by training alone. It is created by systems. And in our work, many of you have heard of what we refer to as the framework, the formula, and the four systems. And so it is these systems and the it's within these systems that create exceptional service. As well, you're not going to be surprised that some of the it's of exceptional service involve, other aspects of our employee experience or the people experience as well. So service excellence is delivered by people. And when employees are unclear on expectations, inconsistently supported, or disengaged from their work, you can imagine that the patient experience will reflect it. This is why service excellence is not just a service initiative. It is a people plus systems outcome. And organizations that we know that are achieving amazing and lasting results take a broader, more intentional approach, which is the focus of the it's of customer service. So what are these it's of customer service that are wrapped into these four systems that help an organization just keep getting better and better over time in sustainable and durable ways? Well, the first it of exceptional service is to set standards for it. So, as an organization, it must be defined. What is exceptional service? And what are our high standards for it? And make these standards, these expectations visible, specific, and actionable. So many organizations have service standards, but they're often buried in policies, inconsistently understood, or rarely used to guide daily behavior. So exceptional organizations really do this it a bit differently. They define clear and observable behaviors, and they make the standards very visible and lived, not just documented. And they involve employees in creating and refining the standards. Now, one of the things that we do to help our partners be able to get a jump start on setting these standards is that we've been able to identify 12 positive communication standards that time and time again, if adopted by organizations and that they're brought alive in the hearts and minds of employees, that these are service standards that move the mark. And these become the subject of training, of campaigning, etc., as the organization is on its journey to service excellence. So, an example of standards is related to hallway etiquette, how we interact with people in common areas or hallways, such as walk people where they need to go. Or maybe it's telephone etiquette, such as answering phone calls with a certain number of rings with a standard greeting. So, these become standards. So, telephone etiquette, hallway etiquette are two of 12 positive communication standards that I referenced earlier. But organizations, they can come up with their own standards of what are those clear, observable behaviors that we want to be lived in our organization by everyone. So set standards for it. That is the first it of service excellence. The second it is to hire for it. So select for service mindset, just not for skill set when you're hiring your next best employee. So too often organizations hire for skill and whatever those credentials and education requirements and experience requirements that you have. So we hire for that and then we hope to train for service. But it's really great when our people already come to us with a high service aptitude, and you can actually screen and hire for that, right? So we hire for the attitude, the empathy, and the service orientation, and then we can train for the technical skills for the role. There's actually some pretty cool applicants pre-screening tools that can be used to really look for that attitude, that empathy, and that service orientation. We can ask behavioral-based interview questions, and we can even set the organization's service expectations throughout the entire hiring or selection process, not just in onboarding and orientation afterwards. So this is it number 2, hire for it. hire for service excellence. The third it is to train for it. So there we go. We do need training, right? And we do build confidence through training, but really through practice, not just information. So training still matters, but how you train matters more. Effective service training includes real life scenarios, role playing and simulation, storytelling and shared experiences. So practice doesn't make perfect, but it does make permanent. And that's what we want. We want these behaviors to be incorporated into this is how we do things around here. And so the training needs to not just be informational, but really transformational. I used to do it this way, and now I do it this way. And this will lead to better results and a better service experience. So, number 3 is to train for it. And when we talk about training as well, it can't be just one and done. It's not like we can train once and sprinkle this pixie dust on our people, and all of a sudden, everything that we taught them, they're going to be able to put it into practice, right? That is not how most training goes. So even though we have really effective training, maybe with those real life scenarios and role playing and practice, etc., it's still going to have to be on repeat. It doesn't mean that the training failed when we have to repeat it. It just means that as humans, when we want to behave and act in new ways, usually it takes more than one training for us to be able to be successful in that new, better way. So we've already covered 3 it's of customer service, right? Or service excellence. Set standards for it, hire for it, and train for it. Number 4 is we need to validate and verify it. I think it was Ronald Reagan that said, trust but verify. So after we've done training and people are learning this new, better way, we need to validate and verify it to ensure that expectations are actually happening for people to do it the new, better way. So organizations, we must actively confirm, are our standards being followed? Are the standards leading to the intended and optimal outcomes? Or do we need to tweak the standard to get the outcome that we desire? And where are the gaps and the barriers? And the key methods that we can use to validate and verify are things like leader rounding with patients and employees, making direct observation, and even looking at data. There are certain data points that we can look at, for instance, in our patient satisfaction surveys, that can tell us whether or not these standards are in play and that they're actually being used in our interactions with our patients. So there's certain ones that we're going to see move in an upward direction if these standards are truly alive and well in our workplace. So that was number 4, validate and verify it. So again, it's not just training. Number 5 is to model it. Now, leadership behavior sets the ceiling for the organization, but this also includes employees that are serving on any service excellence or patient experience teams, because these employees are also leaders in service excellence. And so when we have leaders, both formal and informal, modeling it, then they are really showing the way for others, right? So leaders, both formal and informal, must consistently demonstrate service standards. So whatever those standards are, they must be modeling on them. You've heard the phrase walk the talk, and that really makes them those visible examples of the behaviors that are expected for all. And when leaders don't model these behaviors, it is noticed more. It is like there's a shining light on them, and people are watching them for how they behave. And so that really is why they say that leadership behavior sets the ceiling for the organization. So truly, if formal and informal leaders don't model it, employees just won't either try it or sustain it, or even strive to learn and apply it. So modeling it is a key activity. And those moments of modeling are just so powerful, like helping a lost patient, demonstrating respect under pressure, prioritizing service, even when they're busy, right? So those moments are very powerful. I can think of examples of that in my own work as a healthcare leader, where I knew that when I was interacting with a patient or a visitor, that eyes were on me and I needed to be modeling the standards. So that is it. Number 5 is to model it. Number 6 is to measure it and set goals for it. So I am a data geek. I think if you've been listening to the podcast, you probably heard me say that before or picked up on that. Is I love data, and I love data that tells us what to work on and if what we're working on is working. And so setting goals and targets for improving service excellence and then measuring along the way to see whether it is improving and at what rate and how fast, or are we stuck or stalled or going in the wrong direction. It's important that we measure it and set goals for it. What gets measured gets improved. And without that measurement, our progress is subjective, misperceptions can persist, and improvement often will stall. So organizations that are really committed to an exceptional patient experience where service excellence is part of that, these are the organizations that use reliable and consistent measurement systems so that trends can be identified over time. They do set clear metric-based goals that not just the board or the executives know about, but all leaders, all employees, all providers know about. And they align those goals across the organization. So if service is important for the organization, each department that serves patients or supports patients being served also align goals for that as well. And while I'm talking about data, it's really important to mention or re-mention that data is really meant to drive improvement in positive ways, not to overwhelm, not to punish, not to confuse people. So we want to really understand how best to use data in this way to be a positive force for change in our organization, such as improving service excellence. And now on to number 7 is to evaluate for it. So pausing here to get healthcare executives excited about Capstone's 14th annual Healthcare Executive Forum. Many small and rural healthcare organizations are operating under conditions that naturally strain margins, workforce stability, and long-term competitiveness. Strength today requires more than perseverance. It requires intentional design and doing. And that's why the focus of our Healthcare Executive Forum this year is on designing the future. It's all about where strategic clarity meets execution certainty. This isn't just another conference or networking event. This is where rural healthcare executives learn how to lead their organizations to true organizational vitality. If your plan or your ability to execute it is in question, if progress feels incremental instead of transformational, it may be time for a trajectory changing strategic period. Be a leader in rural healthcare's new era, the era of organizational vitality. Register now and bring your executive team. It is true that the next 3 years may be the most defining period your organization has faced in decades. Visit capstoneleadership.net and click on upcoming events. See you in June in Madison. We can align accountability with what matters most. So if service excellence is a high strategic priority for your organization, we can align that accountability into our performance evaluation process, right? So they can reinforce our priorities. So leading organizations tie formal evaluations to behavior standards, job performance, department goals, organization goals, And all the way through that, right? All of those things can be connected to service excellence if that is a top strategic priority. And that really creates alignment in behavior and performance to something bigger and broader. It creates a sense of shared ownership and accountability across the entire organization when all performance evaluations include this. And it really creates cross functional teamwork that our individual behavior and performance links together towards a team accomplishment or result. So evaluate for it. And this could be connected a bit to validate and verify it, right? And then what you learn through validation and verification becomes formally brought into the evaluation process. So that is number 7, evaluate for it. We got 2 more. Number 8 is to lead it. And what I want to really talk about is beyond modeling it as formal and informal leaders that we talked about earlier. I want to talk about the CEO and the executives in particular. So, the CEO sets the tone and the priority for a lot of things in the organization. And there's really no substitute for that executive leadership commitment. Lacking that, you're just not going to find an organization that's top ranking and award winning if there's really low executive leadership commitment to being just that, right? So when service is truly a priority, executives will talk about it very frequently. They'll show up visibly to recognize it, to validate it. They'll reinforce it and model it in many ways, right? So, in essence, if executive leaders don't treat service as a top strategic priority, others in the organization won't either. So, that's an important to lead it. And lastly, we need to celebrate it. What gets recognized gets repeated, and recognition really fuels culture. High performing organizations recognize service behaviors frequently in the moment. They maintain a strong, what we would call positive feedback ratio, meaning 3, 4, 5 times more positive feedback about service that's going well or getting better than every one time we call out or critique service that's not to our standard, and that we celebrate both results and the meaning behind the results. So sometimes we can celebrate the numbers, right? So we have these goals, we have these measures, and we see them moving in the right direction. And yes, we can celebrate that positive result or trend, but should also celebrate the meaning behind the results. So if a patient is rating their service great, what is the story behind that? What is the impact of that? And so this is where celebration can be both about objective measures, but also subjective stories and connecting the dots between the two. And also just not waiting till you meet a goal for service excellence to celebrate, but to celebrate along the way. And we say party with purpose. And so to really have a purpose and meaning behind what you're celebrating. So examples that help us to celebrate it is to have employee recognition programs, peer-to-peer recognition programs, maybe where patients and leaders can recognize as well. And also having those team-based celebrations. So if a team is doing exceptionally well or made some dramatic improvements in this area, that is a great opportunity for a team-based celebration. And there we are. I've overviewed the 9 It's of exceptional service. Set standards for it, hire for it, train to it, validate and verify it, model it, measure it and set goals for it, evaluate it, lead it, and celebrate it. So bringing this all together, we're moving from a solo activity of training for it or having customer service training for our staff to building a system for it. Do you feel the difference, right? There's a distinct difference between customer service training and building a system for service excellence. And what we've learned is that through our work with dozens of healthcare organizations, we've really expanded that thinking to realize that these its only produce results when they're embedded into systems. And on this podcast, many times I've talked about the team system, employee driven teams, and how they can be major contributors, where they can be engaged, aligned, and activated in organization priorities such as service excellence. The leadership system, how leaders consistently lead to reinforce high standards and achieve goals. The change system, how improvements are successfully implemented and sustained. And the achieve system, how highly aligned goals are set, measured, and accomplished throughout the entire organization. So you can actually start to see a crosswalk between the its of customer service or service excellence and how they're embedded into the team system, the leadership system, the change system, and the achieve system. And I want to end today with talking about why organizations get stuck and how they can move forward. Many organizations have implemented some of the its. Maybe they've done training, maybe they have standards, maybe they have measurements, yet they still are feeling like they have inconsistent execution, reliance on a few people, limited or unsustained results. So, this is not a people problem. It really speaks to a gap, right? Both a gap in the its. Maybe a few of the its, but not all of them are part of the approach. And so there's a gap, which of those are missing, but also a systems gap. Maybe if the leadership system isn't up and running and well, any of the its that can be embedded into the leadership system aren't just going to happen. Or maybe the achieve system isn't set up and there's no goal cycle. So all of the work to set and achieve goals and measure and monitor that is not a system that exists in the organization. Or maybe the team system, so employee driven contributions for both training as well as setting standards and bringing and keeping them alive are not part of the organization's approach. So that's what I mean by gaps. Gaps in the its, gaps in the systems. And really, the shift we want to make is to a bigger picture vision, not just on service excellence, but on overall organizational vitality. And service excellence is an example of or a piece of organizational vitality. It's not the end goal. It truly is part of something bigger that could be, labeled as organizational vitality. Hallmarks of organizational vitality include an organization's ability to attract and retain talent, those that have that service aptitude, earn the trust of patients, be able to execute strategy effectively in this area or others, adapt to change, maintain financial strength. And they can do this because their systems are aligned, not fragmented. And at the center of organizational vitality is a critical connection. A strong employee experience enables a strong patient experience. Organizations that excel in service are not just focused on the patient. They are equally focused on equipping their employees, engaging their teams, and building systems that support both. So, in bringing it all together, the its of service matter, right? The its of service excellence matter, but they truly only work when they're supported by an effective and synergistic leadership team, which is the lead system, an activated employee driven contributions, which is the team system, structured improvement processes, which is the change system, and clear goals and accountability, which is the achieve system. And these systems provide the mechanism and the momentum for continuous improvement and growth, including the achievements of excellence in service delivery. So, a final thought I want to leave you here with, and also some information about an upcoming patient experience event that we're hosting, is that if your organization has been training for it, but not seeing the results, it likely is not a training issue. It may just be time for your organization to build the systems that make excellence and service and all other things consistent for your organization well into the future. And one of the things we're doing to help organizations do just that in elevating the patient experience is in Q4 of this year. So it likely around November. We don't have the dates set yet. We are going to be hosting a virtual patient experience bootcamp. As I mentioned, we've been working with dozens of organizations over the last 14 years that are knocking it out of the ballpark in service excellence. And the ITS of customer service, these 4 systems that I mentioned here today, this approach is what's making that happen. And they're not just getting these big upticks and then dropping back down and not able to sustain it. 14 quarters and counting, they are keeping at that 5-star rating. And so if you want to build that kind of systematic approach to excellence in your organization in the area of patient experience in particular, we are going to be expanding on this even further and more specifically related to bringing and keeping high standards alive so that measurable and palpable improvements in the patient experience can be achieved and sustained in your organization. And we're going to show you exactly the magic behind it in more detail. And so if you are interested or know anyone in your organization that may be interested in the Patient Experience Bootcamp, which is going to be a virtual offering, so there won't be travel and expense involved that way. If you are interested or know someone that is, info@capstoneleadership.net, that is the email address where you can send us an email and just put in the subject line that you want to be on the wait list. So just mention the wait list for the PX Bootcamp, Patient Experience Bootcamp. Just ask to be put on the wait list. And then we will make sure that when all the details are available, no commitment to be on the wait list, but you'll just be in the loop when all of the details become available about the format of it, the days and times of it, the outcomes of it, etc. So email info, INFO, @capstoneleadership.net and let us know that you want to be on the wait list for the Patient Experience Bootcamp. Thanks for your time and attention today. A very important topic for healthcare organizations, and that is the exceptional service to our communities and to our patients. Thanks for listening. See you next week on another episode of Culture Change RX. Bye now.
Thanks for tuning in to Culture Change RX. If you found value in today's episode and you are a believer in fostering change in healthcare, join us in making a difference. Follow, rate, and review our podcast on your favorite platform. Share it with colleagues and your network. Together, we can make a lasting impact. Until next week, keep inspiring positive change.